Welcome to the program. The long-awaited Marshall Plan for Ukraine that has been overwhelmingly supported by the European People's Party will be presented at the Eastern Partnership Summit in Brussels, scheduled for November 24th. To learn more about the document, today we're joined in the studio by Olena Shkrum, a lawyer and a politician. In 2014, she was elected to the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. Hello.
So what is Marshall Plan is all about?
Well, we've been talking about the Marshall Plan for a while now. I would say since I was elected to the parliament, since the Russian aggression on Ukraine started, we were talking about sanctions and about economic support to Ukraine. And we are, of course, very grateful to European partners on supporting Ukraine and on supporting the sanctions. But we do need much more overwhelming points of growth of our economy. Well, because Donbass is occupied, because Crimea is occupied, because people of Ukraine are suffering. About 2 million people have been displaced, and it's an enormous figure which is not known in Europe. When I talk to our European colleagues, 2 million people have been displaced. They are internally displaced persons right now in Ukraine, and it's a huge number. Yeah, even when we talk about refugees in Europe, 2 million people is an unbelievably huge number, and Ukraine has been able hard, but we have been able to keep it not as a humanitarian catastrophe, which 2 million usually displaced people are. We've been able to find them jobs, to find them housing, to dislocate them and relocate them in Ukraine. But of course, without help, it's almost impossible to grow our economy back. And we need to do our homework as well. We need to adopt a lot of internal reforms, and we are trying to do that. Sometimes successful, sometimes very not. But of course, we need this help from the European Union, and I'm very hopeful that EU understands that this war Ukraine is fighting right now. It is not the war for Ukraine. It is the war basically for the European Union, for the democratical world. And of course, Putin is trying not just to disbalance Ukraine. He doesn't care about Ukraine that much. He tries to disbalance the world order and the European Union, and to pressure the EU, to pressure other global powers to work with him. And we can see it from Syria, for example. And here we need to stay together, stay strong, and work together. And of course, a Marshall Plan would be a great benefit to the whole EU, not just to Ukraine.
Could you maybe point out some peculiarities of the plan? If that's possible at this point.
As far as I know, the negotiations have been going, for a while now. So of course it would be better if the European Party would point them out. But basically, we're talking about supporting certain Ukrainian industries. We are talking about supporting certain, for example, Ukrainian agriculture industries as tomatoes and agriculture and etc. etc. We have not had big success in the EU Commission, so we've asking the EU Commission to support us by certain subventions and etc. etc. But we need to do our homework as well. Of course, Ukraine needs to reform the judiciary if we want the investors to come here. Of course, we need to talk about fighting corruption, because corruption will kill any of the investments that will come here. And of course, we need to do our homework in making the tax reform, for example, because the taxation in Ukraine is not supporting for the small and medium-sized businesses, and this is somewhere where we can find investments from the inside the country, where the biggest investment to Ukraine will not be from the Marshall Plan or from the EU, but will be from small Ukrainian entrepreneurs, businessmen, ITs, new technologies, innovation, and we have a lot of talented people who are moving their businesses away because of taxation in Ukraine, corruption in Ukraine, and judiciary. So if we do this homework, we will be able to gain much more than just the Marshall Plan.
So, coming back to the Marshall Plan, there is a financial side to a Marshall Plan, right? You are expecting, Ukraine is expecting to get some investments into various, you have pointed out, some industries that need the boosting of financing. Any particular sum of money we can talk about?
I don't think that I'm at liberty to say, and I do not represent the government. So, of course, the government should make those negotiations. We've been hearing huge figures, starting, from billions and starting just to a number of hundreds of millions of euros.
So where would the money go then? To agriculture, to implementing reforms in Ukraine?
I think that the money already very well spent on implementing reforms of Ukraine. So we need, in my opinion, particular support to certain industries. We need support to Donbas area, which have been devastated by war. And we've been talking a lot that we need to adopt a law as a parliament on the occupied territories of Donbas and Lugansk Oblast. And then we can talk about the reintegration of Donbas, which is under the Ukrainian side right now. And of course, we need money to go there and to support certain industries there. There are a number of factories which do not work. There are a number of destroyed economic enterprises, and it's not just humanitarian aid, but it's also certain sums of money that can go to stimulate investments in this area. But of course, there are specific industries in Ukraine which are not being fought for a while. For example, I believe that agriculture is not only the only thing which is, which makes Ukraine very strong. Of course, we are right now an agricultural country, and we need support for our agriculture, okay. But there are a number of industries which we do not work on. For example, touristic industry, tourist industry.
I agree.
Everywhere in the world, the jobs are made by the touristic industry, by attracting tourism, by attracting new hotels, new chains of hotels, creating new businesses, etc., etc. We have the whole region of Kherson, Mykolaiv, Odessa Oblast, which is an
Ukraine
incredible,
is a beautiful country.
Yeah, of course. And we did some developments in creating a strategy for the tourism of Ukraine, but it is a very, very slow process. So if you look on the brand of Ukraine, and there is a rating of international branding of certain countries where, the countries who attract the most tourists will be #1, like Great Britain or US or France with Paris, right? Ukraine is very, very low on the list. So we have not created a brand as a country that we have the mountains, the Carpathians, that we have the sea, that we have Odessa, which is very interesting, that we have historical land, we have ruins of Kievska Rus, etc., etc. So we need to do this brand and we need to attract those investments. But again, to do this, we not just need the strategy from the government, but we need to fight corruption, because this is what is stopping a lot of international companies coming here and developing hotels, etc., etc.
So basically, we need to tackle corruption in the first place.
Corruption, I would say judiciary, and stimulating economic growth by tax reform, because the taxation in Ukraine is still very unclear. We cannot say that the corruption has been fought there. Unfortunately, it's not. And of course, any investor who comes to Ukraine, either to agriculture, either to the tourism, either to small business or medium business enterprises, either IKEA or Ryanair or Hilton chain of hotels, they would ask how much money will it cost us to build an enterprise or a company here? Will we be able to do it quickly? And do you have a court system that is reliable? And will the taxation change every year as it does now? Or can we believe that the tax will not be raised, for example? And this is the question to any investor and to any Ukrainian who wants to do business here.
There has been information that there is an analog of Marshall Plan, which is called New European Plan for Ukraine. What is it?
Well, personally, I don't really like, the Marshall Plan by the name, because I think that we need to look much deeper. So Ukraine has been fighting the war with Russia, and Ukrainian soldiers have been dying and stopping this war on the borders of Ukraine. And we have lost an enormous amount of factories, agricultural land, and our all the possible things that were actually investing money in Ukraine economy. So right now we need to, again, stimulate growth. And we are not talking about the Marshall Plan as it was, after the Second World War, just to help the country build up. We are talking about the general strategy of reforms, investment, money for reforms, companies that will come here, and economic growth. And this strategy needs to be stable for at least, 20, 25 years. So, for example, I just came from Sweden, where we were talking about our cooperation in decentralization reform and our other cooperation in civil service reform, which is incredibly important. And the plans they do there right now is the plan for the country in 2050. So the plan has to be sustainable, right? The plan has to be well balanced, and we cannot leave, by tomorrow's standards. We have to say to investments that we guarantee your investment for 20, 25 years. We will have a judiciary, we will have a stable taxation, and we will have a stable system of governance. Right now, the institutions in Ukraine are very weak, which is also frightening for investors. So we have to talk about the huge possibilities of methods. It's not just the finances that will come to the country as the Marshall Plan had coming to Germany, etc., etc. It's the whole new possibilities that are right now for Ukraine, especially with visa liberalization process, especially with Ukrainians being a nation now which is very famous for innovations and IT technology, etc., etc. So I think there is a whole world of possibilities, and we need to think outside the box a little bit. But of course, to do that, we need for our government to do the homework very well and to fight corruption here.
Thank you so much for clarifying all of that to our viewers. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
That was Olena Shkrum, a politician and a lawyer. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.